Namaste and welcome to the show. Whether you are a regular podcast or YouTube subscriber for that matter, or you're brand new to Live, Love, Engage, I am so glad you're here. I am Gloria Grace, the light messenger and spiritual business coach. Women entrepreneurs hire me to help them leverage their intuition to break through revenue ceilings and achieve sustainable business growth. And today, we're probably going to be even talking about that, I think, because I am so excited to bring on today's guest. Her name is Sarah Walton, and she is an amazing business mentor who's been featured on the Today Show. She speaks at women's conferences all over the world and has helped hundreds of women start and grow businesses that they love, which is so important. And she honed her business building skills working with startups and large corporations. And she's become the go-to source of inspiration, no-nonsense teaching, and practical integration for women in business, ultimately putting more money in the hands of more women. And I am now, without further ado, going to bring her on today and welcome you, Sarah, to Live, Love, Engage.
Oh, thank you so much, Gloria. I'm thrilled to be here today. This is going to be great.
I'm confident it's going to be that as well. And this is a subject that is near and dear to my heart about all sorts of things. I mean, growing a business, doing it in a way that you have a business that not only that makes money, but importantly is one that you love. And I think I love that that's your mission. I think that's great. And I always love to start off our interviews on this show talking with our guests and inviting them to share with us a little bit about their story. And I know I've been looking on your website and you've had a varied career with all sorts of things, but I'm more, and you can probably get into some of that, but I especially would love to know what has sort of brought you to this position of where you are today, and that you are this mentor and really helping a lot of women entrepreneurs to be successful.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you for that. I mean, it's always so great to be able to share the why, right? Because people are like, why do you do this thing where you're, oh my gosh. And my motto is that I put more money in the hands of more women. And people are always like, how in the world did you come up with that? And I'm like, well, started when I was 5, and that's the truth. It did. I don't know. Do you remember when PBS would do its fundraisers, right? And they would have these gorgeous shows on, and oh my gosh, I'm trying to think of all the different specials, but there was one I really remembered. It was the Nutcracker. And I remember watching this, and I turned to my mom and I was like, Mama, I want to do that. I don't know what that is, but I want it. And it was just dance. And, all throughout my childhood, I would do as much dancing as I could, mostly next to MTV because we were very poor. So I couldn't take that many dance classes. I took some sporadically, but never like really hardcore dance classes where I was being taught the craft and the art of dance. But in my little tiny town, just outside of Salt Lake City, Utah, it's a little town called Sandy. I tried out for the high school dance team. And this was for me, like the goal. When I was 5 and said, I want to dance, like this was the big thing to be able to do, was be able to be on the dance team. And I would watch these girls, at halftime and stuff. And I was just like, oh my God, this is what I want to do. So it came time to try out for the team. And I made it. I was so excited because this was, you just hang on to your hats and glasses, Gloria, because this was like the time when like Janet Jackson was throwing chairs and Paula Abdul was dancing with like animated cats and stuff. Like dance was pretty intense. And there were a lot of knee drops, a lot of pop-ups. And I just remember like in my basement working so hard on this routine to make it. So when I got that letter that I made it, I was so excited until I got to the part in like the middle of the letter where they makes me even like choke up even now, but they, outline how much it was going to cost for the company jacket and the dance shoes and the costumes. And I don't know if you've ever had one of those moments where you sort of like pull away and watch yourself go through something. You're like, wow, she's having an experience. And I remember feeling that even at 16, as my stomach dropped through the floor and my hands were sweaty and I was so scared. And I just thought, how am I ever going to do this? And I was watching this dream evaporate. Because when I say we were poor, I mean, there were times where we literally had half a loaf of bread that my mother made from scratch and a jar of honey, like the end, right? No ketchup, no mustard, like that was it.
Wow.
And so I'm looking at this price list and I'm like, there's no way. So I got a job at the mall. And for those of you that don't know what a mall is,
Yeah.
just think Stranger Things. Okay, you guys, work with me here. All right. But I got a job at the mall and I like was at this little cart, like selling tchotchkes that nobody needed, but it was the 80s. So it was cool. And I got my first paycheck and it was enough for the deposit on the dance costumes. And I was so excited. So my mom takes me to the grocery store and she's got my younger brother, my younger half brother. She's holding his hand. We're walking into the grocery store to get this check cashed at a service station, these stations they used to have inside of grocery stores because I didn't have a bank account. So as we're walking in the store, she says, Sarah, can we get some strawberries? They're on sale. And I'm thinking of my costume. I'm thinking of the strawberries. And I'm like, yes, we can do that. So I go to get my check cashed and I've got the money in hand. And I go to find my mom and my younger brother in the express checkout with the strawberries, but they're not there. And I'm like walking, I'm like, what happened? And I'm walking up and down the aisles and I see them in line with a car full of groceries. And I'm looking at that and it is like my brother's favorite breakfast cereal. It's milk, it's lunch meats, it's bread, strawberries. And I'm standing there, Gloria, and I'm like, I can pay for these groceries or I can pay for this costume I've wanted for as long as I can remember, but I cannot do both. And that was a moment in my life where I decided I could either take care of my family or take care of myself, but I could never do both. And I lived that out. I was the first woman in my family to go to college. I have 65 cousins, so that's saying something, right?
Wow.
I moved to New York City. I get this amazing office inside of technology. I'm now got this big glass office, right? I love it. I'm running a staff of 30. It's so great, except that I'm miserable, but my family's taken care of because I had decided I could take care of my family or I could take care of myself, but I couldn't do both. And there was a day in my office, my daughter had called me and said, Mama, I miss you. And I was hearing the clock in my office tick away the seconds of my life, knowing this is not what I was put here to do. And that was the moment I remembered the grocery store. And I recognized, I don't know if you ever had those moments, you just like kind of go, oh my God, there was a 16-year-old girl running my life because I decided I couldn't do both. And I had made that true. So there I was making all that money, but I was miserable so that my family could be okay.
Mm.
And that was the day I quit. And throughout that journey, I'm saying, yeah, I was in the glass office at the end, right? But that journey, what happened is the higher I got up, the fewer women were around me. Right. And I was recognizing more and more why my mother didn't have the money in the grocery store that day, because women were left out of that conversation, which is insane because business planning and financial forecasting is fourth grade math. There's nothing. I mean, it's just bananas that it's been made into this esoteric, weird, we're so smart, you're so dumb thing. It's just not real, but women are left out of it consistently. And so that day, as I walked out, not easy to do, as I left all that money behind, I took that 16-year-old's decision back and decided not only would I make sure I had enough money and was fulfilled, that any woman in my realm, any woman who I get to interact with or who gets to hear my voice or who gets to play in my world with me, that I do that for as many women as possible. So no one ever feels the way my mother must have felt that day. I can't imagine. And the way I felt that day, I don't ever want, it is just no. It's just, there's no room for that in my world, that there's no reason for that to continue. And that's why I do what I do. It took lots of turns and twists, but every single piece of my journey came together so I could teach this to as many women as possible.
Wow. That is a very powerful story. And I can relate to a little bit of that, only the dance part actually, and the PBS, because my mother and I watched PBS. In fact, one time we even volunteered at the station. We were answering the phones.
I just got chills. That's so cool.
I know. Yeah, exactly. And I took dance lessons. I loved it. I never really aspired to be a dancer though. And certainly I'm a little older than you. So it was before the Janet Jackson stuff, but I know that desire though. And I know about sacrifices because my mother smoked. And when she decided that when she wanted to give me dance lessons, she gave up smoking so that she could pay for my dance lessons. So,
wow.
so again, it's a, we make sacrifices. We can't do it all, right?
Mhm.
That's or so we think. But can
Yeah.
you? So have you found a way? Is there a way for us to be able to, not do what you said, where you're saying now that, this was that idea you had at 16 that you either take care of someone or you take care of yourself.
Mm.
So is there a way that we can do it both?
Absolutely, there is. It will probably weave in and out. There isn't like some golden solution. I think that's really weird. I
Yeah.
call that entrepreneur porn. You know it when you see it, right? It's like this weird thing of like, I make $100 million with a ball of yarn and from the beach. And you're like, no,
Yeah.
you don't.
Yeah.
You
Right.
really, really don't. This is not for the faint of heart, right? It does take work. It does take focus, I think is the number one thing.
Mm.
What I always tell people though is there's really only two reasons that someone is further down the path than you, really. And one is they know something you don't know, or they're doing something you're not doing. The end. Like that's it. And so as we are as women on this journey of like whatever desires we have, whether it is motherhood, growing a family, not having a family, growing a business, whatever those goals are, I think it's really important that we remember one, we cannot do it alone. And I think that's really when my life started to shift is when I found the world of coaching and personal development of like, wait a second, other people have gone through this. Somebody else knows how to get this done. I just have to find that person and learn what they did. And I think Tony Robbins says that a lot. And I love it. And that is that success leaves clues. Somebody has done what you want to do and they've done it well. Go figure out what they did, right? And then the other thing I think that we don't spend enough time on is really understanding which actions move the needle. And that sounds kind of maybe wishy-washy. I don't mean it to be that. It's very, very practical. It's one of the first things I ask my clients is what are your revenue producing tasks? And sometimes just that question, they'll be like, oh my God, I don't even know. Or I've never thought of it that way. I just did my social media posts and it's like, but is that bringing in revenue? And all of a sudden, if we can do a couple of tweaks here and there, the joy comes back because usually what ends up making a woman money is the thing she loves doing the most, right? So if we can just get everything else off the plate and get back to doing what we love the most, the revenue starts to blow up. And then there you are with a fulfilled life and you're making money. It's never like quick fix. It's not a one-hit wonder solution, but it does work. And I've seen it work so many times. It's
Mm.
very consistent.
Yeah, you really brought up one important point that I thought was so important. There we go. Is the fact that you don't do it alone. Because
Right?
I definitely, when you're first starting out a business, you and I know this for my sake too, is that you think you've got to do it all on your own. You think
Mhm.
nobody knows your business as well as you do. And there comes a point where if you're going to want to grow, you have to get help because you can't do it alone.
Correct.
Alone, you've got to because something's going to give,
Mhm.
and it's mostly going to. It's either going to be your customers because you're not taking care of them because maybe you got sick and so then you can't do it, or it's going to be you, frankly, really getting sick because you're trying to do it all on your own.
Yeah. Yeah. And listen, I'm all for Scrappy.
Yeah,
I've been
yeah, and
super
you have
scrappy.
to
The
at some
stuff I
point.
have put together with scotch tape and toothpicks, man. I mean, we have to be scrappy in the beginning. We do.
Yeah.
There's no way around that. And I think it really speaks to the entrepreneurial spirit, right? When you're the one doing all the things. And then there's the moment where we all have to recognize that it's going to break if we don't pull back for a hot second and figure this out. And I share this usually with my clients. Is it okay if I share a personal story of when I blew
Yeah.
this real bad? So it's like, oh, the humanity of it all, right? You guys, we've all done it. But I was actually at one of the tech startups I worked at where I got to work with Marianne Williamson. This was so cool. We were taking all of her old recordings from all over the United States, every church she'd ever spoken in ever. And we were digitizing all of this content and we called it the Miracle Matrix. I was like, how is this my job? Like I work in the Miracle Matrix. Like what? It was so great. And once a month, we would have these great conference calls where I'd get to introduce her and people could interact with her. It was, I was like, how is this my life? It was so, so great. But we were a startup and I was the second employee hired, like 1, 2, right? And I think by the time I made this mistake, there were 4 of us, but I was in charge of communication for the Matrix. And we were so scrappy and so new. We didn't even have an email system yet, right? Like a newsletter delivery system. So I was manually sending emails and blind copying everyone who had signed up for the community. And there was one morning where I had been working until 2 a.m. And then I went to bed, took a nap, I came back at like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I put everybody in the CC line instead of the blind copy line. So everybody got everybody's emails, right? I mean, it was like, talk about it. One of the out of body experience, right? That I was talking about when I got that letter. I was like,
Yeah.
no, it was like slow motion. No, right. One of those moments. And I literally, the head of operations had been on me to hire somebody to help me. And I had been so busy, I hadn't gotten to, and there was so much I had to do that day. I hit send knowing I had done it the second I hit it. And I stood up. I said, give me the list of applications. She's like, yep, we'll take care of this. I was like, thank you. It's like, you guys, we never want to get to that point. And as horrible as that was, I had to call Marianne and apologize. She was so wonderful and gracious, but I was like, she's like, you've been working really, it's all right. We all make mistakes or whatever. Thank goodness, right? She didn't have to be that gracious. That was a big mistake. But moving forward from that, I am so grateful for that mistake because I never did that in my own business, right? Because I could have. It could have been mine, right? Where I was like, I just blew it really bad, right? So it's those moments that can wake us up. And listen, I am all about being scrappy. I know money is really tight when you're starting out, and I am not a fan of spending money for the sake of spending money. I think you have to find the right people. So when that moment hits, when you know it's time to not just be the one show wonder that you are, there's a couple of things. One, if you need to barter. One of my favorite coaches, she's got a strategic mind like you would not believe, and she can't create content. She's like, Sarah, I just get a block, and I create content like I don't even know how. It just flows out of my face, right? But strategy is not always my strongest suit. So we barter. And she's super expensive and I'm super expensive, right? But we'll still trade even today because it doesn't matter as long as the value exchange is equal. So that's always a possibility. You guys, always, that's a possibility. And then the other thing I advise people to do is you always want to be working on your 10. Right? So on a scale of 1 to 10, the thing that lights you up, like for me, that's coaching. I could be on coaching calls back to back for 12 hours a day. No problem. You could put me on a stage to speak 15 hours. I'm good. I don't even care. Right? That's my 10. So that's the only thing I should be doing in my business. Outside of that, I need to find people who are 10s at writing social media posts, people who are 10s at customer service, people who are 10s at proofing my copy because I don't see typos, right? People who are 10s at making sure the billing is correct, right? And that our P&L is working properly. There's so many people who are 10s at those things. So if you can run out and find them, oh my gosh, your business starts taking off. It just starts exploding. And I'll never forget really figuring that out for myself was when we got our head of operations, who is still with us. I just love and adore her. And I'll never forget her first week with us. I was like, what is this magic? Like, I was like, what is happening? This is amazing. And she said, listen, it's my job to make sure you only do what you love to do. And I just like, I didn't like sob cry, but like I welled up with tears because it really made sense to me as a business owner. That's where my time should be because that's where I add value to other people's lives. And me worrying about billing, while that's very important when you're starting, that's not my zone of genius. It's hers and she's amazing at it. You should see how she takes care of people and loves them up and makes sure they're great, And that's that not alone thing. Like you don't have to do it alone. And I think as women, I talk a lot about high functioning codependence, but we have this lie that's been fed to us forever that we're supposed to kill it. We're supposed to have it all together. We're supposed to never need help. And that does not serve women at all. It's something I really want to support all of us in saying, what do you need? How can I help? Are you okay? Have you peed today? Did you drink water literally, are you being a human while you're doing all these extraordinary things? And to call each other out to ask for help because it's not sustainable. And I don't want to see one more burnt out woman or one more woman trying to figure out why it's not working when the answer's out there. We just have to have the right conversations with each other.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So much gold that you're sharing there. And I can relate to so much of that as well. One thing though, I'm curious about it. And since you've worked with a ton of clients over the years, why do you think, or are there some common reasons that you come across for women being reluctant to take that next step, to be able to start hiring help when they're, instead they're just floundering? What have
Yeah.
you found?
Well, I do think it's twofold. I mean, one, I think there's a real fear of money,
Mm.
right? So I think it is really understanding how to structure the business in a way that there is predictable revenue. And I think that's something we miss. We all get so excited. Like once we start, we're like, oh my God, I made money. My business made money. Like those moments happen. And then it's like, okay, great. But how are we going to run the business from that? And I think so that sort of separation from us and the business. So one of my favorite questions that can help with that fear is, what does the business need me to do next? Not what do I want to do or what am I scared of? Treating the business as its own entity can really be helpful because we're so supportive of other people. We're so supportive of other entities. If it's like, what does the business need me to do? The business needs me to create recurring revenue so I can hire other people and make sure they're paid and make sure I'm taking my salary as well. And I think once we get that handled, the fear starts to go away, but it's really sort of sitting back and saying, okay, so I made these couple sales, because that's usually where someone is when they're starting to be like, okay, this is humming and I have no help, right? So we've made these couple of sales, looking at that revenue and saying, okay, how is this repeatable? What did I do to earn this? What in the sales sequence worked? And how can I start to make this a tiny bit more predictable? And we're not talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like, how can I start to make this predictable enough that if I need a virtual assistant or I need somebody to come in and help me with systems at, say, $30 an hour, how can I have them work with me 5 hours a week? Sit down, do the math, and figure out how you can make that recurring. So it's literally like taking the fear away from the money and treating it like the 4th grade math that it is. That's actually 2nd grade math, but close, right? Getting it down there and just looking at it. I mean, like, I can do this. Okay, this is doable. And once we break money down into like biteable numbers, I like to say, it loses its power over us and we start to be able to manage it. So I think that's really important. But the second piece is this high functioning codependence. And I wish I had coined this phrase, because every time I say it, like if I'm speaking in front of people, every woman goes, that's me. I'm like, I haven't even defined it yet. How do you know it's you? But everybody's like, so like they recognize this term. Oh, high functioning codependence. Yes. What is that? Right. And it was actually coined by, I almost said Terry Gross. That is not her name. Her name just flew out of my head. I'll get it. It's Terry Cole. Terry Gross works for NPR. Terry Cole is her name, and she wrote a book called Boundary Boss. And she's a therapist in New York, and she's the one who actually coined this phrase, high functioning codependence. And it starts when we're very young. Okay, so women are naturally high functioning. If you were born into a female body, we have more connective tissue between the left and right hemispheres in our brains. And this is what allows us, I'm snapping my fingers, but it's what allows us to go back and forth, pick up your phone and go, yeah, defrost the chicken for dinner. Did you guys send that email? Yeah, get that over there. No, honey, I can't pick you up till 4, right? That's what allows us to do that. And that makes us incredibly high functioning. But what's happened inside of that is when we were young, is we were taught that that's very useful for people, for us to be that high functioning. And what's really annoying is when we have any emotion about it. And what I mean by that is, as young girls, for a lot of the time, you'd hear things like, oh, don't cry. Where's my pretty girl? And the message starts to come in real quick. Your emotions are bothering me. Can you please stop having them? Thank you so much. And that gets carried on over and over and over. And you'll see this. I always like to use, for all the moms out there, school lunches as an example. Here in my town, everybody can volunteer. Parents can go volunteer to, kind of dole out school lunches for the children. And it's always moms. Once in a while, there will be a dad. When I say once in a while, I think in the 6 years I did this, there were 2 times, right? Once in a while. And the women would freak out. Oh my God, you're so great. I can't believe you. And there's a woman standing next to her who's been there every day for 4 months without any acknowledgement. High functioning codependence, right? You're so great, right? Okay. So men get rewarded for doing what women do on the daily 24/7 without any acknowledgement, except we acknowledge each other with words like, oh, you're so selfless. You have no self. And that's what we're rewarding in you, is that you give to the point. Yeah, you felt that, right, Gloria? Yeah, it's really powerful. I mean, have you not heard that about women? She's so selfless.
Yes, and I've heard that term before, selfless, but I never I didn't connect it to like, that means you have no self. Oh, crap. Holy
Yeah.
yeah. Oh my
It's a
god.
big old crap. Yeah. And we're rewarded for I mean, do we not talk about the women who are killing it? The
Mhm.
Ginger Rogers did it backwards and in heels,
Right.
right? And had to look pretty. I think about that about, female politicians all the I cannot I'm like, God bless them, right, for heading into that arena. And what? Like, the amount of work that takes to get up and give a speech that somebody else can roll out of bed and give. Right,
Yeah.
I mean, it's, like, unbelievable, right? And it's everywhere we turn. High functioning codependent. So it's like, please keep doing that. It works for us. And the
Mhm.
way I talk about that is that women do all of the invisible, unpaid work that makes the society work. And we are expected to do that. And we're rewarded with niceties for doing that, but never financially for doing that. And so, all of that training, you guys, when you start running a business, we have to be so gentle and empathetic and generous with ourselves because we have been trained from moment one not to be paid for the work that we do that helps other people. We have been trained from moment one to make sure our emotions do not bother anyone, which also means our needs. You are not allowed to have needs that bother somebody else. So you better do all of your writing, all of your billing, all of your work, all of your tech, and show up, and you better look good while you do. It's like, whoa. So we have to understand we're up against some serious programming. And I'm not using that as an excuse. I'm saying this is the air we've been breathing. And so until we talk about the air we've been breathing, we're just going to keep breathing it and wonder why we're exhausted. So I'm going to say to you, dudes, this is why we're exhausted and it's okay. We're going to fix it, but we can't fix it alone because that's just more of the same. Right? That is
Absolutely.
more of
Yeah.
that codependence piece of like, look how great I am. I'm so good. Backwards and in heels. I'm good. It's like, you're not good. And that's okay. You shouldn't be good. That's bananas, right? Come take a nap. I got the kids. Like that sort of an energy with each other because it's going to take women to do this with each other in order to actually shift this conversation so that it's totally cool for us to hire people. Of course,
Yeah.
we're hiring people, right? And we're hiring people maybe to do the housework if that's not your 10. And if it is your 10, it is mine. I love organizing and cleaning. Like I could do it all day. It's one of my 10s, right? But for other people, it's their 2s. Well, get somebody it's a 10 to come in and support you so you can do your 10s. Like we're all designed differently, thank God. Or I don't know who we'd go to if we were all heart surgeons. I don't know what happens when our house is on fire, right? We need our different talents. We need different people doing different things. And it's okay, especially for women, to support each other inside of those different things so we can all make more money.
Absolutely. Oh, and the other part that I love too, that you even said before, that the selfless thing that really just like blew my mind. But I loved the point where you said really treating the business as an entity and saying, what do you need? What and I've heard a variation of that before, but I don't know. For today, it just really struck me. Because it is. And- Oh, I know why it's different. So I know, and I think I've even talked about this in the past, is that sometimes one of the reasons why we're reluctant to hire help is because our business is our baby. But we do at some point raise our children, or at least I've been fortunate enough to raise my children to then leave the nest. So we need to then, I think, have the same, not exactly about the business leaving us, but having a way to be able to start to grow up. And we do that with our kids by giving them more responsibility. So it's about finding other people then to serve the business and asking, what do you need? So yeah, I love that.
It's a
Thank you for
great
that.
analogy, Gloria. That's
Yeah.
perfect. That's right. At some point, we have to be able to turn it over to other people and trust
Yeah,
that it's
yeah.
going to be taken care of. Yes,
Yeah,
that's
because
correct.
they've gotta be able to stretch and grow, and it's not just us doing it all the
Right.
time, so that's so awesome. I This is like one of these conversations. I know we could probably talk for like an hour, but I do love to ask my guests this, so I'm gonna ask you this before we start closing out, but because I love the answers that I get from people. So, what are you curious about right now?
Oh, that's fun. Um, Gosh, I have really gone headlong into I want to say all of the power of abundance is probably the best way for me to describe that. My Abundance Academy has been open for 9 months now, and the deep dive that I have had to do to support those students, right, and watch what they're doing with abundance. I mean, we have one woman. I think she made an extra $106,000 in the first 4 months she was in the Abundance Academy, right? So it's like I love breaking that down with her and being like, all right, where were the different mindset shifts? What happened here? What happened there? Because I happen to believe, real business success is only 20% strategy. It's 80% mindset. And I think we've all had that experience, right? Where it's like someone gives you a proven strategy, right? And it doesn't, you're like, what? So if you go at it like this isn't going to work or this is done, it's not going to work. I don't care what strategy it is. It's not going to work because your head's not on in the game, right? So I think really understanding almost at a scientific level how that happens. Like I love this conversation so much and watching, for example, the way the trees grow and the fact that our hearts beat all day and that the sun, if you were to look outside right now and look at all of the different places sunlight is touching the earth, it's like, oh my gosh, abundance is around us all the time. How has it caught on that there's not enough? How did that myth catch on? Like I'm kind of in that space of understanding. How did we as humans decide this was the game we're going to play? I don't have enough. What it says, how did this happen? And how are we living as if that's real? So that's really what I'm curious about right now. I hope I answered your question, Gloria.
Oh, you did.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And yeah, I wonder the same thing too, because it is. We really do live in an absolutely crazily abundant world. And I think it was I used to listen to Louise Hay a lot, and actually she had like these positive affirmations and that I was listening to, and she would talk about the fact that even if like and I'm going to mangle it now, but basically is that there is enough money for everybody on the planet. And it's just that it just, for some reason, just always seems to gravitate to there's some that just are having like a whole bunch of it and then some that don't.
Yeah.
But there is enough for everyone to go around. So very cool.
Yeah.
Is there anything else that I didn't ask you about that I should have, and or any last wonderful piece of advice you'd like to give our listeners today?
Well, can I do one real fast? It's a little bit funny, but I'll be fast.
Of course.
Okay. So
Yeah,
it's sort of on when you ask me what I'm curious about right now.
Mm.
And this comes from a book called The Soul of Money, which I highly recommend everybody reads. It's by Lynn Twist. It was written in the 80s, but it absolutely holds. And there are 3 myths she talks about in that book. And these 3 myths are keeping all of us broke, right? So I love what you just said, Gloria, of like, how come it's going to them, but it's not going over? Like, what is going on here? And the 3 myths are, number 1, that there's not enough, right? Which is totally untrue. And anytime somebody pushes back on that, I'm like, go look at a garbage can at an amusement park and tell me there's not enough. We can drop bombs within inches of where we want them. There is no reason that we are not dropping food, water, and medicine where it needs to go. Myth. Number 2, more is better. That's another myth we have, is that more is better, which is vicious because no matter how much you do or how much you make, more is better. So you're still not there yet, right? It's kind of like that insatiable craziness that we can have sometimes in our own motivations in mind. So that's myth number 2, is that more is better. And the third one kind of locks it all in. And so I really, if you take nothing from today's podcast episode, I hope people remember this, is that the third myth that locks all this in is the resignation myth called that's just the way it is. And that robs us of our intrinsic power to change whatever we want to change. You don't like the way your health is going, you have a lot of power around that. You don't like the way your money is going, you have a lot of power around that. You don't like the way your relationships are going, you have a lot of power around that. You don't like the way politics is going, you have a lot of power around that. And that we start to understand that myth is what locks people out of the conversations that can change everything.
Oh, so powerful. Absolutely. That last one, because I always say this, is that the power that we have is that we get to decide in whatever it is, whatever we want to do. It starts here, and we get to decide how we want to be, what we want to do, what we want to have. It doesn't matter. And that's how you see that there are countless rags to riches stories in this country as well as all around the world, of people who came from that. And you're an example of it right there. You were talking in your story. So there is more than enough. Not even just that there's enough. There's more than enough. And yeah,
There is.
Change starts right here, right now. You just get to, you get to decide. And I know that's what Tony Robbins always liked to say too. You can decide just like that. The snap of
Mhm.
the fingers. That's it.
Yeah.
You,
And yeah, and it's I mean, I really wanna thank you for today, Gloria, because it's these conversations, right? This is when decisions get made,
yeah,
is when we have the willingness and the vulnerability and the openness to have these conversations where we say, "Look, I learned from this mistake. This one's not perfect. I totally believe that myth," right? Like, where we can
yeah,
really be honest and open with each other so we can support everyone in being part of any conversation they wanna participate in that can change the complete trajectory of their lives, starting right this second. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you so much. This has been amazing. And I know that there are people out there today who want to know more about you, I'm sure. So, where is the best place that people can contact you?
Oh, thanks, Gloria. That's so sweet. I mean, you can head on over to sarahwalton.com, and that's Sarah with an H. And it's Walton like the family on TV if you're old enough. All right. I'll just leave that there. But I also have a YouTube channel. We have a podcast. It's called the Game On Girlfriend Podcast because this is not your practice life. The game is on. And I like to hang out over on Instagram too. You can find me there as well.
All right, very good. Well, I'll have all that information in the show notes. So for those of you listening somewhere who don't have a pen handy, later on, go to liveloveengagepodcast.com. You'll be able to get all that information or on your favorite podcast platform. And yeah, I just want to say thank you so much again for today. This has been a tremendous interview. I really enjoyed it. And keep up the good work you're doing in the world.
Thanks, Gloria. You too. Thanks so much for having me.
And I do want to thank all of you for listening and for watching. And you make my day. I'm so glad you're here. And until next time, as always, I encourage you to go out and live fully, love deeply, and engage authentically.